foremost expert in fantasy basketball. He is the director of basketball content for rotoworld.com. And once again, it's always my pleasure to have him on the show every year to preview the season and give you the advice that you need to be able to win your fantasy leagues. It is my pleasure to have Doc A, Steve Alexander from Atlanta, Georgia, calling from Atlanta. How are you, Doc A?
Good. How are you?
Everything's real good. Really good, thank you. Everything's really good. And it's going to be such an extensive preview as we do it here at SMTA. And I wanted to ask you your thoughts. First question I had for you. The Olympics were, this past summer, the Olympic Games in Beijing, China. And usually some players are able to elevate their games after that experience. Do you think anyone on the U.S. team could elevate more from that experience, you think?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. It seems like Dwayne Wade played really well at the Olympics, which was kind of the precursor to him being a top 5 fantasy pick this year. Mm-hmm. Seems like he's going to jettison off the Olympic gold medal fever and whatnot to hopefully stay healthy this year and have a big year. Mm-hmm. But most of the guys that played really well for the Olympic team are already at a pretty high level, and the guys who didn't play that much for the Olympic team, I don't see any of them really blowing up this year, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow. And do you think like someone like when we look at foreign players like Marc Gasol for the Spanish national team and Fabricio Oberto for Argentina, do you think those two guys can definitely be able to improve? Because a la Steve Nash, like his game went through the roof after the 2000 games.
Yeah, I don't think Oberto is ever going to be a guy that fantasy owners are really going to be too excited about or really need to own. Mm-hmm. Marc Gasol's very interesting. I mean, he's going to get a lot of boards and blocks, has real soft hands, can pass the ball well, can shoot the ball well. It may take him a couple years to develop, but he's the starting center in Memphis right now, and he's owned in almost every league I'm in, and he's going to make an impact this year. And then the biggest story from the Olympics, in my opinion, was Rudy Fernandez.
Oh yes,
and that dunk he threw down on Dwight Howard, and his athleticism, and the confidence he gained from the Olympics. Now, that's a guy, he wasn't on the USA team, but he's playing for Portland this year, and he's coming in with a lot of confidence. And Nate McMillan was there in Beijing for those games on the bench, and I'm sure he was, even though Rudy was throwing it down on his own team, he was pretty happy inside.
Exactly, that's true. And someone that elevated, I think 2 players that elevated their draft stocks actually. Patrick Mills from St. Mary's, the point guard from Australia, he really looked good, as well as Ricky Rubio from the Spanish team. Those 2 could be lottery picks in 2009. So. It'll be interesting,
Yeah, they're talking about Rubio going number 1 overall, which I'm still not sure I see that. But then again, I mean, he's so young. The kid's like, 18, 19 years old?
Yeah.
So maybe in a couple, maybe next year, he could go number 1. I didn't see it at the Olympics. He's got skills, though. There's no doubt about it.
And he needs to build his upper body, too, as well. Like, definitely, I would rather go with, like, a James Harden of Arizona State or a B.J. Mullins of Ohio State or Samardo Samuels, Louisville, one of those guys over Rubio, be interesting.
Yeah, I read speaking of all these European players, there's a real interesting column out on Fox Sports right now about European players' mentality. And does the typical European player care enough to win an NBA title?
Ooh.
And I haven't read the whole thing. I've read the beginning of it, and the basic premise is that they care so much about winning for their country and playing for your country and playing in the Olympics and playing in, those types of events is so much more important than playing for an NBA championship. And because here in America, it's all about the rings. It always has been.
Right.
But there, that's a way for them to make a living. But their heart is really with the national team. Which, you think about guys like Dirk Nowitzki and it's an interesting idea.
Wow, no, that really is. I'm definitely going to read that article. It's interesting because those guys too, they didn't grow up in America, so the NBA wasn't really in their face. Especially the kids that are now in the league, the NBA was just at the peak of their existence, you know, in the late '80s, early '90s. So a lot of European guys didn't really get that same exposure, you know, to the NBA.